Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and Gamefound over the next week. If you're new to the channel, we do this every week going over all the upcoming campaigns, so if you want to stay up to date, this is the place to be. But before we get started, I do like to go over some news and announcements that I just found out about over the past week. And I only really have one thing that I want to mention, and that's that there is a new expansion being added to the universe of Keyforge. And I didn't have a chance to look into this one in too much detail, but it will be coming in April. But something that I did see with this one that does look really cool is that they're actually going to be having a few cards that you can put into multiple houses. So this will give you a lot more flexibility whenever those cards come up. But if you do want to learn more about this one, or if you just want to know more about Keyforge, which is an excellent game, I will be jumping into this one in more detail during the week of its launch. And of course, you can subscribe down below. Other than that, I do always like to make a quick mention to Alex over at Boardgame Code, because him and I do work together to keep track of all these upcoming campaigns so that I can put together this video for you here today as well as every other week. But Alex does also put a video out at the start of each month letting you know of the heavy hitters for that month. Of course, he has a ton of other content as well, so definitely check him out if you want to see more from him. If you're interested in more of the historical war games, definitely go ahead and follow along with Zilla Blitz, because he covers more board games in that genre, whereas I just briefly mentioned them, and he also covers a lot more of them than I do. And also, if you're interested in the upcoming retail games for each week, go ahead and check out QVO Games. I don't work with him at all, but he does great content, and you'll want to check him out if you want to see what's coming to retail. But that is everything I have for an intro, and we got about 15 games to cover this week, so let's check them out. And the first campaign we have launches on March 11th, and this one's called Algae Inc. And this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 90 to 120 minutes to play. And this is a game where all the players are going to be working for the same company that produces and processes different types of algae into different types of products. But this is a competitive game, because in this game, although all the players are going to be helping the company grow through different parts of Europe, as well as helping that company achieve different milestones, each player is going to be gaining points individually based on their contributions towards those goals. There are a couple shared boards at the center of the table that are going to represent your presence in Europe, as well as the different factories and the overall supply chain that your company has access to. But the reason that players are going to be able to make their own individual progress towards all this is because each player is going to be managing their own department within this company. And this is an asymmetrical game, which means that your game is going to be a little bit different than your opponent's depending on which department you manage. Your department's going to be represented by your own personal player boards, and each player is going to have their own set of these boards, and they will share a few mechanisms, but there will be a few changes between them depending on the department that you are representing. Players will be individually processing different types of resources, and along the way, players will be able to hire different types of staff like operators, engineers, and scientists. And players will be taking advantage of those unique skills in order to optimize and customize their own production line to hopefully make a bigger impression than their opponents. Players will have to make different trade-offs as they upgrade their board, because you're going to be choosing between buying either engineering tiles to help improve your factory, or science tiles, which will allow you to improve your actions. There's not a whole lot more info on this one at the time of me filming this video, but I hope that gives you a general idea of what you can expect with this one. And if that does sound interesting to you, I will have it linked in the description below. So if you do want to learn more, you can check that out. And of course, click to get notified once it launches. Launching on March 12th, we have Incal Infinite, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 30 to 45 minutes to play. And this one is based on the comic book series with the same name. But if you're not familiar with that series, I think you can still have a ton of fun with this one, especially if you are interested in cooperative games, because this is a cooperative one. The way the game works is that you're going to be putting a bunch of these location boards in a circle in the middle of the table, and there's a bunch of these locations offered in the game, but you're only going to be playing with a small subset of them, which is going to add a ton of variety from game to game. But within each of these locations is a semicircle cut out in the side, and you're going to be randomly assigning a token to that location face down, with each of the tokens having a number on it. And the goal of the game is to try and flip all those tokens up in ascending order, and if you're able to do that, then you win the game. But if you ever attempt this and get any of them out of order, then all the players automatically lose. Not only that, but you're also going to be including a random enemy in each game, and there's a bunch of different enemies offered in the game as well, and they're each going to be adding their own rules and unique loss conditions to the game, as well as some different effects that the players will have to deal with. The way that players gain more information as to which token is located at each location is by playing the appropriate sets of cards at that location, and the sets required are depicted on those individual boards. There's a few different types of cards with different numbers on them, and the different locations might require you to have certain sets of numbers or certain sets of cards, or maybe a combination of the two. But once you are able to complete that objective, then the player that was able to do that is going to be able to look at the token at that location. Players will be taking turns performing their actions in this game, and on your turn you have 3 different actions that you can choose from. You can either choose to move the spaceship, and anytime that you do that, you always have to move counterclockwise. You can move any amount, but anytime that you pass the enemy, that's actually going to be adding a damage card to your discard pile, and then it's also going to cause the enemy to move 1 space counterclockwise. But wherever you do decide to stop, you'll also be able to place any sets of cards from your hand onto that specific location. You'll let me check in if the conditions of that location have been met, and if they were, then you'll be able to look at the token at that location. The other action you can perform is to simply draw back up to your hand limit. You're going to be drawing from the shared deck, but if you do have any cards left in your hand, you can also choose to discard one of them before you do so. And you're also going to be adding a damage card to the discard pile anytime that you do perform this action, so you do want to perform it sparingly. But the final action that players can perform is to attempt to flip all the tokens in the appropriate ascending order. If they're able to do that, then they win the game, but if they get a single one incorrect, then everybody loses. So you only want to be performing this once you're absolutely sure, because you're only going to get 1 crack at it. But there are even more ways to lose the game, because if the enemy ever makes a full rotation around the board, then you also lose the game that way. And also, if a player ever has 3 damage cards in their hand at any point, then you also lose the game. And the thing about damage cards is that they never get discarded. Even if you perform the action to draw back up to your hand of cards, you can never discard the damage cards. Luckily, there are a few one-time use special actions that players can perform, and you'll be able to do this anytime that you stop the ship at this location at the bottom here. There's going to be a bunch of different tokens down there that all represent different special actions, and once you perform that action, you'll be flipping that token and then continuing on with the game, hopefully in a better position than you were before. But the game continues like this until either one of those lost conditions are met, or a player was able to flip all those tokens up in ascending order. And at that point, you either win or lose the game. And if you want to learn more about this one, I will have it linked in the description below. And of course, you can click to follow along and get a free gift added to your pledge. Also launching on March 12th, we have Wroth, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes only 60 minutes to play. And this is the next game coming from Chip Theory Games that has made a whole lot of excellent games in the past. And this one is actually going to be a competitive area control game. In this game, each player is going to be playing as their own asymmetric factions with their own unique abilities, as well as a unique one-time use superpower. And the whole goal of this game is to be the first player to reach 40 victory points. And because I am filming this one before the campaign has even launched, there's not a whole lot of images out on this one yet, but they did release an official video that will give you a bit of an idea of what the game looks like. And I should also mention that this one is our own Discord pick of the week, and I'm not surprised because Chip Theory makes a ton of excellent games. And also this one is really interesting because, like I said, this is an area control game, but the way that the actions work in this game is that you're actually going to be drafting dice. But before I jump into the different actions in this game, it is important to understand how the board actually works, because the board's going to be broken up into a bunch of different locations, and at the start of the game you're going to be assigning a token randomly to each of these locations, and then whichever player controls that location is going to be gaining the benefits of that token, which is usually a special action or resource, but you're also going to be gaining the amount of victory points depicted on that token as well. But in addition to drafting those die at the start of each round, each player is also going to be gaining an income, placing 2 units out on the board. Then they'll also be able to roll one of their own personal dice that is going to grant them with a bonus action or some way to augment their actions during their turn. But of course, players will be spending those dice to perform the various actions, which could be to gain additional income, reinforce a region that you already have a presence in, attack a region adjacent to one of your regions, allowing you to remove opponents from that adjacent location, or also you can move all of your units from one region to an adjacent region. But if you ended up with a die that isn't particularly useful to you, you can also spend any die, no matter what value it has on it, in order to gain additional basic units. And of course, if there's basic units, there's also elite units, and these can vary from faction to faction, but you can also spend the money that you've earned in order to buy those elite units and then be able to place them out on the board, and the elite units are represented with dice. And like I said, there is that personal die that players can use, and this can be used to grant additional attacks on your turn, grant you additional income, or even double any of your action dice, allowing you to perform that action twice in succession. After all the players have performed their actions, you're then going to be checking the board to see who has majority control over each of the individual regions, and they're going to be granting those players the associated victory points. But each faction also has their own specific conditions that can grant them additional victory points. This is going to be outlined on their own personal player board. You're going to be checking for this as well and then granting any victory points from that. And the game continues like this until a player reaches 40 victory points. And for an area control game with dice drafting and everything that comes along with this one, I'm really impressed that it's able to play so quickly. So it looks like a ton of fun, and if you are interested in checking it out, I will have it linked in the description below. Also launching on the 12th, we have FantasyForm, which is the next solo game from Button Shy Games. This takes just 10 to 30 minutes to play, and in this game you are an alchemist going up against a rival alchemist. And we do have all these fancy images on Boardgame Geek, and they do a great job of showing what these cards look like, but why stoop to Boardgame Geek when I have a copy of the game right here? And this is what the game looks like, all set up with a couple rows of cards, with the top row representing a bunch of different essences that you can purchase, which essentially act like a one-time use ability. And then at the bottom here we have these 3 cards on the left, which are going to determine what happens to you on that round. And then on the right here on the bottom, we have a few different items or forms that you can purchase because you're going to be upgrading yourself as the game moves forward. And this is a button shy game, which means that you're going to be doing quite a lot with just a few cards, because all of these cards are actually double-sided, with the items or forms being on one side, and then the back having those different encounters. And all these cards here represent your alchemist. You're going to have a basic form, a basic item, as well as a starting companion. And this track here represents basically how much money you have to purchase different items out in these rows. Like I said, you do have a rival that you're going up against as well, and this is going to be controlled by the game. And this is also a double-sided card, where the first time you get to the rival phase, you're going to be flipping this card to the opposite end and then also giving that rival a form. There's a bunch of different forms offered in the game, and they all behave a little bit differently, but what's cool about these forms is that you can purchase them for yourself, but there's always going to be one that does get assigned to the rival. Every time the game does come back to the rival phase, you're going to be rotating this card 90 degrees, and if it fully makes its rotation, then you're going to be losing the game that way, but you can also lose the game if you completely run out of health. And this is a game that plays over a series of rounds, with the start of the round being dictated by these 3 encounter cards. The way these work is that you're going to be resolving the first section of the first card, the second section of the second card, and then finally the third card is going to be dictating the market prices for that round. What's cool about the way that the economy works in this game is that you could purchase different types of essence at a market price this round, and then sell them on a future round where they might be worth more, and that can be a way that you can generate income in this game. Just to quickly show you how all of this works, this first encounter card says that for each essence in my pack, I have to either lose 2 shards or take 1 damage. Since I haven't purchased any essence yet, that is going to have no effect, which is lucky for me on this first turn. But then the next encounter card says that I have to take 1 damage unless I have a water elemental tag. And since I don't have that tag on any of my cards, I would then be taking 1 damage, lowering my health down to 4. Finally, we look at the market prices here, and these have the different types of essences and the costs that they're going to be associated with for this round. And then I can just go and purchase anything I want from the item row here, or any of the different types of essence. But there is a nice card here that gives me a bit of a loan, and it costs nothing to add into my inventory. And it also grants me with 4 shards, which is going to be taking me up to 12. But anytime that you purchase a card from this row, it's going to be replacing the associated card that you already do have in your inventory. And unfortunately for me, the current market prices are pretty expensive. Pretty much every single item here is more expensive than the next market card that will be taking its place, except for this blue one. So I guess I'll just go ahead and buy this blue essence, which will then bring my amount of money down to 2. That's pretty much all I want to do, so I'm going to be moving into the next phase. But to determine what phase that's going to be, you have to check how many cards are still in the essence row. If there's 2 or more, you're going to be moving into the exploration phase. But if there is just 1 or less, then you're going to be moving into the rival phase. Since there's 2 or more, we move into the exploration phase, which pretty much means you're going to be moving a few cards around. But before I do that, I do want to correct one rules goof I made earlier, because when you do purchase an upgrade from the upgrade row, you then replace it with the one that you previously had. Now that that's corrected, let's continue with the exploration phase, where you're going to be discarding the rightmost upgrade, and then sliding these 2 cards over. You're then going to be taking this encounter card and then flipping it into the upgrade row. And then we take the rightmost essence card and then flip it into the leftmost side of the encounters. And you can already see how this is going to be changing up the entire game state for the following round, but then you can also see how it's slowly going to be diminishing your essence row, which means that even if you don't buy any essence, you're eventually going to be going into that rival phase, because these cards are going to run out. Let's just go through one more round now that everything has cycled around here, because this new encounter card says that I can buy any number of essence for 1 shard less than the market price. And then this next one says that I get to heal 1 point of damage unless I have a fire icon on any of my cards, which I do not have because I got rid of it last turn, which means that I get to heal health. And then finally, we have the new market prices, and this one allows me to sell this blue card for 1 more than what I purchased it for. Whenever you sell an essence, it goes back to the left-hand side of the row, but that one's going to be gaining me 11 more of the currency here, which is going to be putting me up to 13. But I'm essentially just going to be trying to buy up more essence this turn, since everything is at a nice discount, especially this one since it has a cost of 1. Plus, everything is 1 less shard than what it's listed as, which means that this one is completely free. These 2 pink cards have a cost of 2 this round, which means that they only cost me 1 each because of the discount. So I'll just go ahead and buy both of those, which brings me down to 10 here. And this sets me up to sell them on the next turn, because I'm going to be getting a bunch of extra coins, and I don't really want to buy much more, otherwise I'm going to be triggering the rival round. But since I do want to show how that actually plays, let's just pretend I went ahead and did 1 more round, and then we ended up with 1 card here that would then send me into the rival phase, where when that happens the first time, you flip this over to the other side, and then you're going to be looking for the first card in the discard pile that has a form on it. Then that's going to be your rival's form for the rest of the game, and then you're going to be using this card to mark its health. Once you've done that, you're going to be resetting the play area and then continuing the game just like I described until you come back to the rival phase for a second time. But then at this point, your rival is going to be activating their special ability, which here says take 1 damage and then discard an essence from your pack. But this is also an opportunity for you to do some damage, because for a cost of 4, you can deal 1 damage to the enemy. And the game continues like this until either you or your rival are defeated. And if this one does sound interesting to you, you can check it out. I'll have it linked in the description below. And of course, you can click that button to get notified on launch. Also launching on March 12th, we have Flashpoint: The Legacy of Flame, and this plays 1 to 6 players and takes just 45 minutes to play. And this is exactly what it sounds like. It is a legacy version of Flashpoint. And if you're not familiar with Flashpoint, it's an excellent co-op game where players are going to be playing as asymmetrical firefighters with different abilities and number of action points. And you're going to be working together to try and keep a fire at bay, but more importantly, to investigate different points of interest that could be different civilians that need rescuing. And then, of course, get those civilians out of the fire. And unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of images of the legacy version of this game, but if you do want to see what this game actually looks like, definitely go ahead and check out Rado's video where he does a complete walkthrough and final thoughts. I could show it in this video, but I don't want to just go ahead and take his footage that he worked hard on and then just post it up in my own video. So definitely just go ahead and check out his video if you want to learn more about this game and how it plays, and also to get an idea of what it looks like. But for this video, we'll just have to settle for the next best thing, which is a blurry image of the back of a box from 2011. But the way this game works is that players are going to be taking turns performing actions on their turn. There's a bunch of different actions you can perform. You can just move throughout the board, paying more action points to move through the fire and other areas that are more difficult to get through. Or you can also use actions to extinguish fire or to look at a point of interest to see if it's a civilian that needs rescuing. Whenever you do find a civilian, you're going to be trying to bring them out of the fire safely, but there are other hazards that you have to be aware of as well that could trigger in different ways and even cause explosions or different events to occur. After a player's turn, you're going to be rolling 2 dice, 1 black and 1 red, and then those are going to correspond to the different rows and columns out on the board, and wherever those intersect, that's where you're going to be putting a new fire token. Unless, of course, there is already a fire token there, and in that case, it causes a little explosion. Luckily, players do have their special abilities and might even have access to some different vehicles like the fire truck or the ambulance that can help the players along the way. But the legacy version of this game expands on every aspect and also takes you into a new environment, because in this version you're going to be fighting forest fires. As the fire spreads throughout the board, you're going to be putting black tokens out representing the fire going deeper and deeper into the forest. And this is one way that you can trigger a loss of a scenario because the fire has gone too far into the forest, making it more difficult to stop. This legacy version is also going to introduce a bunch of new maps and scenarios, which can all have different and unique elements. And of course, your decisions, your successes, and your failures will carry forward into the following scenarios. This means that not only will you be able to upgrade your firefighters with different items and abilities, but also any damage accumulated on them will also carry forward unless you give them some time to rest, which means that you might want to take different firefighters on a following scenario so that your other firefighters can have a bit of R&R. What's also new in this game is that each turn you're going to be drawing a card from the fire deck, which is normally going to cause you to roll those dice and put out new fire tokens, but it can also have other unique effects or even cause nothing at all. But it can also cause you to draw event cards from the event deck, which can also have more elaborate positive or negative effects. But the beauty of all of this is that both of these decks can be modified with new cards being added and removed as you play throughout the entire Legacy campaign. So you do have some control over what ends up in these decks. A really great game here that you can play pretty much with anyone while still having a lot of strategy and fun decisions to make. And if you are interested in a legacy version of it, definitely check out this campaign. I'll have it linked in the description below. Also launching on the 12th, we have Armello the board game, and this is a game that looks like it plays about 4 players, and I'd guess would take about 2 hours to play. But if you've heard this name before, this is because this board game is based on the video game with the same name, but also the video game is a virtual board game, so it does translate to the board game space quite easily. But if you're not familiar with the game, this is an area control game where players are going to be playing as asymmetrical characters with different stats and abilities. They're going to be moving around on a map, staking claim to different settlements, completing quests, and engaging in combat through dice rolling. The board game offers 2 paths to victory. You can either be the first to reach 70 victory points or reach 30 victory points and then make your way into the palace at the center of the board and successfully slay the king. Because I'm filming this before the campaign launches, I couldn't find a whole lot of info on how this one plays. I did reach out to the publishers, but they haven't got back to me yet. So I'll just let you know what I do know based on what is provided. And like I said, this is a deck building game, and it looks like there's going to be a few different types of cards that you can add into your deck. There are the item cards, which are normally one-time use or equipable gear. And then there's the spells, which are going to be granting you with some sort of special effect to help yourself or help with combat or something like that. But these are normally quick and simple in comparison to the trickery cards, which are going to be more complex and usually break the rules in some sort of way or modify the situation for your opponents to put them in a worse position. Like I said, not a whole lot of info on this one right now, so if you do want to check it out, I will have it linked in the description below, and of course you can click to get notified. Also launching on March 12th, we have Veiled Fate along with a few new expansions, and this plays 2 to 8 players and takes about 60 to 90 minutes to play. And I'm just going to say it now that this one is my home personal pick of the week. First of all, I love Veiled Fate. It's an awesome social deduction game, and I am normally not a big fan of social deduction games, but also I have played this new expansion, and I think it adds quite a lot to the game and makes it even more fun than I already thought it was, and it's an expansion that I would never play the game without. Well, at least one of the expansions, because I haven't played all of them yet, but the one that I did play, I definitely recommend. But if you're not familiar with this game, this is a deduction game that uses bluffing and voting as primary mechanisms. And the way that this game works is that each player is essentially going to be associated with a particular demigod, which you can see scattered across the board here. And you're trying to end up with the most victory points at the end of the game. The way that works is that the main board's broken up into a bunch of different regions, and there's going to be these quest cards associated with each region. And there's a whole bunch of these quest cards offered in the game, and you're only going to be seeing a small subset of them each time you play, which is going to give you a lot of variety from game to game. But essentially, these quest cards are broken into a few different sections, with each section having a space to put a demigod. Some of these cards might have restrictions as to where and what demigods can actually be placed on them, but once all the spaces on a quest quest card are completely full, that's going to be triggering that quest card and the related effects to each of those demigods. This could be good or bad for each of those demigods, but the way that all of this works is that players are going to be taking turns performing 2 actions on their turn, and you can use those actions to move the demigods, and if you do move them onto a space on a quest, that also allows you to add either a white card or a black card face down beside that quest, which essentially increases the odds of either the white side or the black side of that quest being triggered, which, depending on if your demigod is on that quest, you might want one side more than another. As more players take actions and move demigods onto those quests and also add their votes into the stack of cards, you'll then be revealing all those cards and then tallying up the votes in one way or the other, and then all the demigods on that quest will face the repercussions of the side that won. All players know who moved which demigod to which quest and which cards have been flipped up there, but you don't know exactly which player added which card, which means that you're going to be trying to accumulate that information as the game goes on, because figuring out who is associated with which demigod can be very useful information when you're trying to win this game. What's really awesome is that once you get to the higher player counts in this game, you actually play in teams of 2. There's going to be 2 of you assigned with each demigod, so it's also really valuable to try and figure out which player is also on your team. Of course, there are a bunch of other actions that you can perform as well that allow you to modify the board in different ways, like moving demigods with more flexibility, or even modifying the cards on some of the quests. The thing with these more powerful actions is that you do have to discard cards in order to pay for them, and once you pass on a turn, you can't perform any more actions for the rest of the round, and the round ends once all the players have passed. Once that happens, there's also going to be a special event card located at the center of the board that has a few options for outcomes, and players that have any cards left in their hand can use those cards to vote on a particular outcome. This gives players even more options for manipulating the state of the game. Of course, there's much more to the game than just that, but the game essentially continues like this over a series of rounds, and then the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. And like I said, this new campaign is going to be adding a bunch of new expansions to the game, and there's going to be 4 included here. And the first one is the Hadria expansion, and this is the one that I played, and I highly recommend grabbing if you are a fan of this game or if you plan on getting it, because this one actually adds a new character onto the board that isn't controlled or associated with any of the players, but it will follow any of the demigods around as they move if it currently shares a space with that demigod. If quests resolve or certain events occur in the same location as Hadria, then that's going to be gaining or losing her victory points. But the cool thing about the victory points for her is that any player that has more victory points than Hadria cannot win the game. So this creates a kind of push and pull mechanic where you're trying to have more victory points than everyone else, but you're trying not to get too many that push you over the amount of victory points that Hadria has. But it also gives you the opportunity to try and force your opponents to get victory points if you feel like pushing them over that edge is an easier way to get them kicked out of the scoring. But then there's also the Celestials expansion that's going to be adding a bunch of new asymmetrical win conditions and abilities for each of the players. Then there's the servants that are going to be moving around on the board as well, and they can modify the outcome of quests depending on their effect in that location. And one thing that I didn't explain is that demigods can actually be smote or smited or smitten to the abyss, which is a special area of the board. And then as you move them out of the abyss, you get access to a special ability that will be activated when you move to the center of the board. And this is originally determined by a card that is randomly drawn each round, but the renewal expansion is going to be replacing that card with a die. So instead of using the card, you're going to be rolling a die to determine the benefit that you get there. And that's Veiled Fate and the new expansions, and I highly recommend checking this one out if it sounds interesting to you. And of course, you can find a link to the campaign in the description below and click to get notified. And also launching on the 12th, we have Under Our Sun, and this plays 1 to 6 players and takes about 60 to 180 minutes to play. And this is a cooperative post-apocalyptic game where players are going to be in a desert wasteland. And to start the game, players are going to be choosing a mission to play, which can have some special rules or setup, unique victory conditions, and can also introduce semi-cooperative modes as well. And something that I think is really cool about how the missions work in this game is that they are all represented by different cards. And if you trigger certain events or state to happen in the game, it can actually cascade into another mission card, which is going to kind of change the situation or environment that you are playing in. At the start of a game, players are going to be choosing their different characters with different roles and stats, as well as unique special abilities, but you're going to be getting your own personal player board that you're going to be using to track your health, your actions, and your water that you're going to be managing throughout the game. And anytime that you need to deplete a water but you don't have any on your board, you're going to be depleting a health instead. There's also going to be a few slots at the bottom of the board where you'll be able to hold different items or resources, and items in this game can also be deconstructed in order to trade them in for various resources. And this is an exploration game where players are going to be discovering the map as the game goes on and as you're revealing different tiles, but each round is broken into a day phase and a night phase. At the start of the day phase, you're going to have to deplete one water from your board, and then you're also going to be revealing a weather card that can have all sorts of different effects, normally not good ones that will drain more of your resources. But players are going to be taking turns spending action points to perform various actions on their turn, and these actions can allow you to move around to different locations or even add new tiles onto the board. And anytime that a new tile gets added, it can have different points of interest that can be either good or bad, but there'll also be a number of resources that you may need to add onto that tile. If a player moves onto a tile with some resources, you can also use an action to collect some of those resources, but if you move into a tile with an enemy, that enemy is going to be instantly attacking you unless you're able to roll for a sneak check. And like I said, each of the characters will have different stats in different categories, and these are going to be used for different skill checks throughout the game, so sneaking might be a little easier for one character than it is for another. This is why it's really nice that you can actually see the tile first before you move on to it, because then you'll know if there is an enemy there and if you want to risk engaging with that enemy. So in the end, it is up to the player to decide, unless you decide to perform the jump move action, which allows you to both add a tile and then immediately move onto it. And this does save you some action points, but of course you don't know exactly what's going to be on that tile, so it is a bit more risky. But there are also some other things that you can come across with these tiles, like trading posts that allow you to buy or sell gear or even potentially steal the gear, and also events that can have a variety of different outcomes and can utilize different skills and abilities in order to use them to your advantage. But after all the players have performed their actions, you're going to be moving into the night phase and then also drawing a night card, which normally has some sort of negative effects for the player. But players can then take additional actions here, with one of the actions being to sleep. And if you choose to sleep, that's going to help you get more actions in the following round. But players could instead choose to sacrifice their sleep in order to take additional actions during this time. But anytime that you move during the night phase, you're going to be drawing another night card. So moving around too much during the night is not a good thing. Combat in this game is resolved using dice rolling, and the different characters will have access to different dice depending on their strength, but then you can also add additional dice if you do have the associated items. Of course, the enemies will also have some sort of strength stat as well, which is going to dictate the dice that they roll. And some of the enemies can also get you infected as well, which means that you're going to have negative consequences until you find the appropriate meds. But the game continues like this until the players are either eliminated by the various threats and weather conditions, or until they have completed that mission, and in that case they would win the game. And if you are interested in this one, I will have it linked in the description below. And also launching on the 12th, we have Inventors of the South Tigris, and this plays 1 to 4 players. It takes about 90 to 120 minutes to play. And I know I say this every time a new Garfield game comes out, but I do think this one looks like a ton of fun. But I am a little bit biased because dice worker placement is one of my favorite mechanisms, and the South Tigris series is all around dice and dice worker placement. But the way that this game works is that players are inventors competing to create, develop, and publish different inventions, and players are going to be working on shared invention boards, and they're going to be moving down a track through the different phases of their development, and players are going to be able to gain victory points based on their contributions there. What's cool about the way the dice work in this game is that they're going to be moving through different sections of your board, with each of those sections granting those dice with special benefits. Not only that, but players are also going to be managing a tower represented by these different tiles here, and on the tiles are a bunch of tokens that all represent different tradesmen. All these tokens start the game at the bottommost location on your tower, and then anytime that you use them, you're going to be gaining their benefit. Then they're also going to be moving up onto the next floor. What's really cool about the way that this whole tower works is that it's actually a tower that just goes on for an infinite amount of floors, because once all the tokens have moved up from the bottommost tile, all the tiles are then going to slide down, and then your bottom tile slides to the top, but then you're also going to be activating the ability of that tile. And like I said, this game is all about building and contributing to different inventions, and this is what a completed and tested invention looks like. But this is actually made up of two main components. There are the component boards and then the component cards, and you'll be able to combine these in any way that you like in order to form the invention that the players are going to be working to complete. And that's going to be moving through several phases out on the main board here. The game's going to start with a bunch of empty boards on the leftmost space, which is the idea phase of the invention. Players can use an action to add a card to one of these boards, but in order to do that, you're going to have to spend the associated cost as dictated on the board, which usually involves discarding some amount of resources, as well as spending a certain amount of die that adds up to more than the amount shown on that board. And once a board has a card on it, that invention can now be built, which does move it up to the next column underneath the board. And in order to do that, you need to also spend the dice in order to be greater than the amount depicted on the card. But then you'll also have to pay the cost to activate the required tradesman out on your own personal player board. Once an invention is built, players can then perform a couple new actions on that invention. You can either choose to test that invention, or instead you can just go ahead and publish it. Publishing an invention works very similar to building it. We're going to have to spend the appropriate amount of dice, but then you're also going to activate a specific tradesman from your board, which is your scribe. Once an invention is published, players can still go ahead and test the invention, and that's what these three spaces are in the top left corner of that invention. And in order to take that action, you just have to spend a die that matches that same color, and that's going to allow you to move your boat along on the main board. Wherever your boat stops, you'll be able to take the associated tile there and add it to your own personal player board, granting you with some upgrades for when you place dice on those actions, allowing you to also get the benefit if the dice that you place there also meet the requirements of that tile. There are a bunch of different benefits that you'll be gaining for creating, building, and publishing these different inventions, and you will be getting additional benefits as other players make developments on an invention that you've already contributed to. One of these benefits gains you influence in one of the three factions, and this influence can be spent to perform special actions later in the game, but they can also be used to gain you victory points at the end of the game if you have enough influence in a particular faction, depending on which inventions that you contributed to. The game does play over a series of rounds, with each round ending with a scoring phase, and then you're also going to be scoring again at the end of the game, and then player with the most victory points at that point wins the game. If you are interested in this one, you can check it out. I'll have it linked in the description below. Also launch on the 12th, we have Trade and Triumph, and this plays 2 to 4 players. It takes about 45 to 75 minutes to play. And this is a competitive game where players are all going to be starting in the center of the board, and then you're going to be taking turns moving your pawn one space, drawing a card, and then playing a card. There are 3 different types of cards that players can gain in this game. There are the trade cards, which are played face down when you do play them, and they're revealed and activated anytime that you enter one of the trade hubs or the center of the board. These can cause all sorts of different effects and also earn you gold, but they might be conditional based on the hub that you are currently at or the route that you took to get there. There's also the influence and the specialty cards that you can choose to draw instead, but the thing to know about these ones is that they do cost you money. The specialty cards cost you money when you purchase them, and then the influence cards cost you money when you play them. The influence cards will give you a special or ongoing effect, and these are played normally face up when you play them. Specialty cards work similar to this, but have more powerful effects and often earn you additional victory points for the end of the game. And like I said, anytime that you draw a card, you can choose whichever deck that you want to draw it from, assuming that you can afford the cost of the specialty cards. And this is important to note because you can also purchase upgrades as you gain money to spend throughout the game. And these upgrades can allow you to gain more movement for your movement action, allow you to gain more cards when you are drawing cards, and also just grant you more actions that you can use however you want. This allows you to build up a bit of an engine and have even more powerful turns as the game goes on. but the game just continues like this, with players moving around the board, drawing cards, and playing any cards that they want until a player is able to get 20 victory points, and that's going to be triggering the final round of the game. Then the player with the most victory points at that point in the game wins the game, and if you want to check this one out, I will have it linked in the description below. Also on the 12th, we have BB Blast, which plays 2 to 4 players, takes about 5 to 15 minutes to play. And this is a game that I did cover in the past, but here's another opportunity to get your hands on it. So if you are interested in this one, you can go ahead and check it out. But if you haven't seen this one yet, I'll just go ahead and roll my previous footage for you now. And this is a competitive game where players are going to be playing on teams against each other in an airsoft tournament. In this game, each player is going to be choosing their class of either light, medium, or heavy, and the class that you choose is going to come with specific stats that indicate how many lives you have, your speed, as well as your actions. It's also going to come with a special ability as well as a number of points that you'll be able to spend in order to equip your character with some starting gear. It is required that all players must have a gun, and each gun's going to have different stats associated with it that indicate its accuracy. The neat thing about accuracy is that when you shoot your gun, you're going to have to roll a die below a certain value, but your accuracy is just the starting value, and then it's going to be reducing depending on how many spaces the opponent player is away. But in addition to a gun, there's all sorts of other weapons like a tripwire, a rubber throwing knife, a grenade, and even a riot shield, and these all have some different effects and abilities for players to take advantage of. Players are going to be taking turns performing the number of actions available to them based on their class, and you'll be able to use those actions to move around on the board, use your items, and fire your weapon. When a player is eliminated, they do spawn back on the board up to the number of lives that they have according to their class, but the first player to eliminate the opponent team enough times that they can no longer respawn wins the game, and if you want to check this one out, I will have it linked in the description below. And now for games launching on the 13th, we have Quests Over Coffee, and this plays 1 to 2 players and probably takes about as long as it takes to have a cup of coffee. But this is a game where you're going to be trying to complete 10 randomly drawn quests in order to win the game, and players are going to be rolling dice in order to complete these quests, and there's going to be a value that you need to get over in order to complete that quest and gain its benefits, and then there's also going to be a value that if you roll under that, you're going to be getting those negative consequences. There's also a neutral effect that can be triggered if you roll in between those two values, but essentially you do want to succeed because that's the only way that you get the card into your hand and secure it for victory points at the end of the game, because if you fail the quest or end up in that neutral territory, the card does get discarded. But the game offers a bunch of different characters that you can play as with different stats for their health, their luck, and their money. You're going to be spending your luck in order to re-roll any of those terrible rolls, but then you'll be using your money to purchase different upgrades or hire companions that can help you on various quests. Like I said, you're going to have the opportunity to complete 10 different quests, but you only do 5 at a time. For the first 5, you're going to be drawing an environment card, which is going to be adding a special effect for those 5 quests. And then once you've completed them, you're going to have the opportunity to visit the shop and spend any of the money that you might have earned for some additional items. And then you're going to be drawing a new environment card that's going to replace the previous one, adding some different effects to the following 5 quests that you'll then be drawing from the quest deck. Other than that, you can just choose whichever quests you want to complete in whichever order that you like, and you're going to be rolling your dice to try and get higher than that success value. And one thing I forgot to mention is that you can also spend your money in order to purchase more dice to roll for that quest. Once all those 10 quests have been resolved, you're going to be adding up all the points from the ones that you managed to complete successfully, and then that's going to determine how well you did on the game. And I do also want to mention that there's an adventure mode as well that allows you to choose your path through the various quests. And if that all sounds interesting to you, you can find a link to this campaign in the description below and follow along to get notified once it launches. Also on the 13th, we have Travelers Tokyo, and this is a game for 2 to 5 players. It takes about 45 to 75 minutes to play. And this is a competitive game where players are going to be spending 3 days and 3 nights in Tokyo, traveling around and trying to complete different objectives. There's going to be an objective for each day that you can only complete before the end of that day. And then you're going to be visiting different locations, placing tokens there to indicate that you visited that location, which will also gain you victory points at the end of the game. And then there's also going to be your individual cards that you're gaining throughout the game that are going to present you with different missions and objectives that, if you complete those, can also gain you victory points. Of course, to do all this, you're going to have to spend various types of resources, and that's where the different cards come into play, because there are going to be cards that can grant you resources, cards that are going to be giving you different must-see locations that if you're able to go there, you'll gain additional bonuses. And then also culture cards, which act as those mission cards that if you meet the requirements of the card and then also pay its cost, you're going to be gaining a really nice benefit. But one other thing to note about the culture cards and the must-see cards is that those can both be discarded at any time to gain some amount of resources or money, but of course they're not going to be granting you with as much as the resource cards, but it's still a nice option if you don't think that those cards are going to be useful to you. But the way this game works is that players are going to be taking turns performing 3 actions on their turn, and one of the most common actions is the move action, but the thing that's interesting about this one is that you can move by walking, taking the train, taking the bus, or taking a taxi. These all have various costs and benefits to them, with walking being the cheapest method but not getting you very far, and then the taxi being both the most flexible and also the most costly. But the other action is just to play one of those culture cards. If you do meet the requirements of that card, you're just going to be showing it to the other players to show that you've completed it, but that does cost an action as well as any additional costs outlined by that card. Finally, there's the visit action that allows you to visit a location that you're currently located at, and you can only visit each location once, but if you do have a must-see card for that location, that's going to be gaining you some additional bonuses. Once every player has performed all their actions, that's going to be triggering the end of the day where players will all be able to draw back up to their hand limit. You can draw any of the cards from any of the decks that you like, but there's also going to be these different hotel tokens out on the board, and if you do end the day at a location that also has a hotel, that's going to be granting you with some additional bonuses as well. But at the end of the game, you're going to be tallying up all the victory points, and the player with the most victory points wins the game. And if you are interested in this one, you can check it out. I'll have it linked down below. And launching on March 14th, we have Baseball Highlights 2045, the Bases Loaded Edition. This is going to come with all the previous content and expansions, as well as a big box solution to store everything, with dividers and space for future expansions as well. And this is also going to introduce a brand new 15-card All-Star expansion. But if you're not familiar with this game, this is a competitive game where each player is going to be getting a deck of cards representing their team, and there's going to be some starter cards in that deck, but you will be able to purchase more cards as the game goes on and improve your deck with more powerful cards. But each player in this game is going to have their own personal player board with a baseball diamond on it. And each game, player is going to be drawing 6 cards into their hand from their deck. And then you're going to be playing that game with those 6 cards, taking turns playing 1 card to the center of your board. These cards can have a whole variety of effects on them, but then underneath the ability, you're going to see a number of bases that card can potentially take. If you see multiple of these on a single card, that actually means that you get to put that number of batters out on your board. So for example, if you were to play this card that has 2 singles on it, you're going to be putting 2 batters out on home base, and then if your opponent does nothing about that before your next turn, they're both going to be moving up, taking a single base. But since you can never have 2 players on the same base, one is going to be pushing the other forward, allowing you to actually move one of those players 2 bases. And this is where a lot of the strategy comes into play, because you might have also noticed that some of these pawns do show up in different colors, and these represent how fast that pawn is at running. The white are the slowest and the red are the fastest, and each of the cards will indicate which type of pawn that you get to put on your board. And since a base can only be occupied by a single pawn, anytime that a pawn moves into a base with another pawn, it's going to be pushing that pawn forward, which can cause cascading effects. So if you do get one of your fast pawns behind one of your slow pawns, that's pretty much the perfect situation, because your slow pawn's going to be moving as fast as your fast pawn, since that pawn's always going to be pushing it forward. And if you're wondering what exactly makes the red pawns faster than the white ones, well, the white ones just move the amount that's dictated by the card, whereas the red ones always get an additional base. But once all the players have played all of their cards, you're going to be seeing which player scored the most runs, and then that player is going to be winning that game. And then you're going to be moving this token forward on the game's 1 track, and then the first player to get to 4 games won wins the game. But like I said, between each game, you'll be able to purchase more cards to add into your deck. And the way that that works is that you're going to be taking all the cards that you played and then adding up the amount of income that those cards grant you, and then that's the amount that you'll have to spend to purchase new cards. If you're wondering what sort of things the extra expansions add, I did look through most of them, and they're going to be adding all sorts of different cards with new abilities and effects, but there's also an expansion that allows you to increase the player count, and there's also an expansion expansion that adds manager cards that grant a one-time use powerful special ability for each of the players to use at some point during their games. I couldn't find any info on the actual All-Stars expansion, so if you do want to know what the new expansion is going to be added to the game, you have to check out the campaign, and I will have it linked in the description below. And launching on the 15th, we have Oghmu, Age of Discordance. And this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 30 to 60 minutes to play. And this one is a dice-driven skirmish game that offers a few different battlegrounds for players to play on, with each of these locations offering different effects that could be triggered by the player's actions. But essentially the way that you win this game is being the first to eliminate all your opponent's forces. The game offers 6 different factions for players to choose from, each with their own distinct characteristics, goals, and unique faction ability, as well as a variety of heroes that are all going to have their own unique abilities as well, special actions and attacks that can have a range, number of targets they can hit, and an associated effect. And each of the different units will also have some basic actions that they can all share and take as well. And like I said, the combat in this game does use dice rolling, but it looks like you'll also be able to assign the dice onto the various locations out on your board in order to activate the associated abilities. I don't have a whole lot more info on this one, and I don't normally dig into as much detail on the skirmish games, so if you do want to learn more about this one, I will have it linked in the description below, and you can check it out to see more details once it launches. And that's everything I have for you this week, but don't leave yet because we still got a couple awesome giveaways to announce, and these are the easiest giveaways to enter ever. All you got to do is leave a comment down below. You don't have to like or subscribe or do anything like that, although I do appreciate it if you do think I deserve it. But I'm also going to be doing something a little bit different, at least with this first giveaway, because I'm only going to be drawing from the YouTube comments. I normally do include some additional giveaways for all my members over on Ko-fi, but I want to do this just this one time because I feel like the YouTube comments have been a little neglected, and I've been wanting to make some changes to improve the balance a little bit and make a better situation for both the members on Ko-fi as well as the YouTube comments. And this is something that I have said several times now, but I just still haven't found the time to fix it. These videos alone probably take me about an hour for each game that's covered. So in this video, that's like 15 games. So this one video takes me like 15 hours. So if you're wondering where all my time goes, that's just one part of my week. I'm hoping this isn't too controversial and doesn't upset anyone over on Ko-fi. I think everyone there is mostly there to just support the efforts that I put in on this channel, and I truly do appreciate it. I don't want this to seem like I don't appreciate those efforts, but just this one time, I do just want to grab the comments from the comment section. And there'll be a lot more giveaways to come in the future, and I will also try to find the time to make the changes that I do have outlined on my Ko-fi already. The way I had it now did work well for several years, but just as the channel's grown and as more and more people have gotten involved in it, it's kind of needs a bit of rebalancing, so we'll figure it out. And if you are one of the members on Ko-fi, don't forget that you still can comment on this video to get entered into this giveaway as well. But this first giveaway is going to be for a pledge for the Harry Potter's miniature adventure game, and this is a head-to-head skirmish game where each player is going to be spending a number of points in order to build up their team, but then players are also going to be gaining different spells and building a tableau, and the types of characters that you have on your team are only going to have access to certain spells. So you'll want to try and build a team that has certain synergies so that you can share those spells across those different characters, giving you more flexibilities on your turn. Of course, there's a lot of other aspects to this game as well, and there's different potions and items that you can equip and use for different advantages, and there is a ton of additional content that you can check out in this pledge, and also new content being added with daily rewards. So if you are interested to check this out and see everything that's unlocked across the different days, I do have this linked in the description below. This giveaway is going to be for the Owl Pledge that gets you a core box and all unlocked stretch goals, and all you gotta do to enter this giveaway is leave a comment down below with the hashtag Potter. And maybe you could let us know something that you really liked about the Harry Potter series, or maybe your favorite scene or a little bit of information. I actually only read the first few books, but I did end up watching all the movies. But something that I noticed in the first book is at some point in, well, spoiler alert for one, but at some point in the story, they are throwing snowballs and they hit the one teacher in the back of the head with a snowball. But then later you find out that Voldemort's face is actually there, so it's actually kind of a funny Easter egg that Voldemort got hit in the face with a snowball. And nobody really acknowledges it. Good luck in the giveaway, but that is not the only giveaway that we have. And this one I will be drawing from the comments and also from the Ko-fi members. This one is for the Nexus Unsanctioned campaign. And this one is also a bit of a head-to-head skirmish game. But in this one, you're going to be controlling a team of mutated gladiators. Players will be able to play across a variety of different maps with different types of points of interest and traps and hazards on each of these maps that players can take advantage of. But what's cool about this one is that you're actually playing as the manager of this gladiator team, which means that you have a lot of other options when it comes to tipping the scales in your favor, because you can actually gain influence and also issue bribes outside of the battle in order to create conditions in the battle that are a little bit more favorable to you. This giveaway is a really nice one, so I do want to thank the publisher for donating this pledge, because this is for the roleplay bundle, which is going to come with the core game, as well as the new Unsanctioned expansion, and also the Nexus Legacy Edition, which is going to add a whole campaign element to this game. And to enter this giveaway, it's the exact same thing here. Just leave a comment down below with the hashtag Nexus, and you can say anything that you want, but if you're looking for something in particular, maybe you could let us know what mutant character you would love to have on your gladiator team. And I'll accept any monstrosity that you can come up with. For myself, there's probably a better choice than this one because I don't really like his character, but Chainsaw Man is a pretty cool idea, and I can't deny that that just doesn't look friggin' cool. Good luck in the giveaways, but now let's go ahead and draw for last week's giveaways. And we actually just had one giveaway last week, and this was for a pledge for Chroma Arcana. And to draw a winner, I'm going to be using this application here, and all these extra names down here are bonus entries for my Ko-fi members. And if you're not familiar with Ko-fi, it's basically the same as Patreon, except for they treat their creators much better. But let's go ahead and draw the comments and draw a winner. And the winner of Chroma Arcana is Adam Rayberg from Ko-fi. So congratulations, Adam. I'll reach out to you and let you know that you won yourself a sweet pledge here. And that is everything I have for you this week. I hope you all have a fantastic week, and hopefully there's a couple games out there that have caught your interest, and hopefully you've been getting a lot of games to the table as well. I just got 7th Citadel in, and I've played through the introductory scenario, and it was really good. I'm really enjoying it. It's not a game for everyone, but it's definitely a game for me. I'm really excited to see what comes next. And I really wanted to play it tonight, but I also wanted to get this video out for you guys. So thanks so much for watching. I do really appreciate it. And until next time, just remember, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.